Hello, and welcome to episode 82 of Expertise is Overrated, the podcast that takes the time to answer the questions you didn't know you didn't want the answers to. I'm Vib.
And I'm Sean, and neither of us has any clue what we're talking about.
Unlike New York Times best-selling, probably author Jim Butcher, who found his voice again.
You're welcome, I'm a wordsmith.
One of the worst, like half-assed, nothing
It's
sentences
so
anyone has ever written.
half-assed.
Well, a sign of things to come. What on earth happened there? You're usually relatively eloquent.
I sat
Not a
down
complete moron.
and I sat down ready to record, and you went, "You've not written me a funny sentence yet," and I panicked.
Seldomly have I regretted such an action.
Because so shut up.
I was the one who gets annoyed at that. Fucking that was seldomly.
That was a good rant today. That was very funny.
Just don't try to be clever using a smart word and then get it wrong. It's not seldomly for those listening and confused.
It's one of my pet peeves is people who think using big words makes you sound smart. Like I
feel a bit attacked there, but yeah.
No, but I think there's a difference between using the correct word when it fits correctly in a sentence and shoehorning in verbosity for no reason other than to make yourself sound smart. Now, see what I did there? Verbosity was the perfect word for that sentence. And I was struggling to come up with something different, but that's the distinction, I think. Sorry.
We're not going to go down another grandiloquence rabbit hole. We've been there before. Speaking of being at places before. Actually, before we get started.
Yeah, sorry, we're just gonna. We've both been running around like headless chickens today. We're 20 minutes later than we should have been. I need to go to bed in an hour.
Well, I mean, you're 20 minutes late because you were somehow cleaning up a kitchen mess
late.
that is inexplicable to me, but I won't throw you under the wife-shaped bus.
She doesn't listen to the podcast, it's fine.
Oh, fair enough in that case. What on earth? Why does pasta need that much cleaning?
Well, realistically, it only took me half an hour to wipe down the table after having dinner with a 3-year-old and a 8-month-old and empty and reload the dishwasher and wipe down all the surfaces. Like, it wasn't that bad. Well, it took me more like 40 minutes, but yeah, it just took longer than it sometimes does because I think my wife was paying me back because I cooked dinner last night, and I'm a very, very good cook, but I'm an unbelievably messy cook.
Oh yeah, me too.
I've got absolutely no truck with clean up as you go type nonsense. I'm far too busy and important to do stuff like that.
See, it's funny because that's my philosophy at work. I'm pretty good at sort of cleaning up and keeping tidy as I go, but then when I'm home, it's just like a bomb has exploded. And I also somehow use every pan and pot I have available. Doesn't matter if I've got 2 or 17, they'll all be used. It's like fill the space you have, you know?
I do exactly the same thing. I always clean up after dinner as well because wife puts the baby to bed, so that's fine. But I was still pottering around the kitchen after she came back through after cooking yesterday, so I think there was a little bit of revenge, gentle revenge going on.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well done to her. Legit. Yeah, no, she did it. She did right. She did. Yeah,
right while you were doing that, I trekked all the way to my local O2 store.
That's
amazing.
amazing.
To pick up a phone I'd ordered, only to find out that neither my Belgian identification card, nor my German driving license, nor my university card apparently count as photo identification.
They wouldn't take a bod card in Oxford.
I know, right? That should be like the holy gospel.
Genuinely obscene.
No, and then I checked because I didn't believe the guy at first. It's like, this is good enough to get into countries. You're saying it's not. You're telling me it's not good enough to pick up this phone. He's like, oh no, it needs to be a passport or a UK driving license. Which I looked up. It is O2's policy, and it makes no sense to me. And I'm very angry now.
So, I'm not going to defend O2, although it's funny that they've annoyed you. But the only thing I can think is everyone knows what a UK passport and a UK driving license look like.
Yeah, no, but by his, well, So a Belgian passport is apparently going to be good enough. Because I agreed with you. Maybe it's like, oh, it's a UK standard issue, but obviously I have no UK form of identification. So unless they're telling me I can't actually collect this phone.
Being filthy Johnny Foreigner that you are.
All right, Edinburgh, pipe down.
Hey, I'm trying to appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah. Well, you always get the benefit of on the 1 minute claiming you're British, and on the other side, well, I'm not English.
It's so fantastic.
I'm foreign.
It's so fantastic.
Yeah, I bet it was fantastic when Scotland played in the rugby this weekend. Anyway, shall we move on?
No, so just while we're talking, you had a terrible customer service experience. I was on the phone with my electricity supplier this afternoon, and their hold music is inexplicably, "Is this the way to Amarillo?" Which, is so good. And you pick up the phone, you phone them, and because it's unbelievable. My phone number is associated with my account, so I don't have to push any buttons to be like, "Do you have an account? Do you want to talk about billing?" Blah blah blah. Any of that? They just recognise the phone number and put me straight through to the member team. I have to hold because obviously I have to hold, and then the robotic voice goes, "There's just here's a nice bit of music for you while you wait." And then, inexplicably, 70 bajillion decibels come blaring out of the tinny phone speaker on my phone. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. I'm just like, what the fuck? It's so good. So
it makes sense, right? Because odds are if you put on hold, you're going to put your phone down and you're going to probably wander around.
But
so if the really loud music stops, that maybe somebody's on the other end of the line.
But what actually happened was I pressed the mute microphone button on my phone, and then just danced around the kitchen singing "Is This the Way to Amarillo?" I must have looked like a lunatic. It was great. I had a great time.
I mean, you are a lunatic, but...
And then they helped me with my query within 5 minutes. Unbelievably.
I love that. Octopus, great customer service.
Yeah, absolutely. Happily take a sponsorship.
Me too, yes. Yeah, Octopus, if you're listening. Why would you be?
Anyway,
but, yes, third time lucky. Let's move on to the matter at hand.
Speaking of people who can't use electricity, Harry Dresden.
Oh, God. I really thought you were going to say Jim Butcher, and I was like, where the hell are you going with this? Yes, Harry Dresden, yes. He can't use electricity. That well, right? Anyway.
Something, I don't know. Keep going. Push through. Push through.
No, I'm going to let you sit in this.
Lovely. Well, we learned recently by a very confusing metric that is hosted on Jim Butcher's website, the How Complete Is the Next Book bar that fills up, that he has finished writing 12 Months, which is the next book in the Harry Dresden series, which is very exciting because it's been quite a long time.
It has been quite a long time. We're coming up to 2 years.
Is that all? Was it 2023? I mean, I believe you.
I think it was 2023, wasn't it? Hang on. Let me find out.
Yeah,
Dresden Files.
My instinct is that it's longer than that, but I don't...
Oh shit, yeah. Battleground hit stores September 29th, 2020.
Yeah,
because it's been 4.5 years.
Deep in the depths of COVID.
And by the time it comes up... yeah, that's actually a very good point. I remember that when it came out.
Because no one had anything to fucking do.
Yeah. But yeah, 12 Months is now compiling instead of loading.
Is that how he does it? That's very clever.
But it says 12 months compiling 100%, whereas before it was 12 months loading 100%. So I don't understand the distinction there. But I guess it's being edited and soon to be with the powers that be above him.
So what I saw from his most recent tweet, or perhaps not his most recent tweet, but the tweet about this was that he has a post-writing process that he goes through, which takes 1 to 2 weeks of going back to things he's made notes that he needs to fiddle or update type thing. But that only takes a week or so, and then it goes to the editors for proper editing to catch, typos and continuity errors and things like that.
Well, yeah, and for them to say, Jim, this is shite.
Please try again.
Yeah. Please start all over. I mean, it seems unlikely that that's what they will say, or he or she, presumably an editor, one person. But
I have no idea. I have no idea how you write a book.
Me neither, to
as
be honest.
we've previously proven, I can't string a sentence together, so...
Yeah.
No, but I think...
That's fine for you. I'm vaguely considering writing one, so that's a bit different for me. I should really know how these things work now.
I think writing an academic treatise is slightly different.
It still needs an editor, doesn't it?
Probably
One
not
imagines.
that different, to be fair. I don't imagine they'll be looking for continuity errors. Although...
Well, they probably should, not going to lie. No, it's going to happen. I think, well, I don't know if that was actually Jim Butcher or just people on the internet estimating that, but maybe around about 6 months to a year.
I think that sounds right. I'd be shocked if it was any quicker than that, because things like printing take time.
Yeah, and James Masters needs to read it, because that seems to have always dropped around about the same time as the release of the book.
I don't know if that's what happens. I don't know where the beta reader concept fits in all of this as well. I don't know whether there's a group of people who now have to read the book, if that makes sense, or if that happens as it's being written.
You imagine it happens as it's being written, right?
I don't know. I would, but given the very glacial pace at which it's come out,
sure.
I mean, if you
got these crazy speed readers, right, who can read things in.
Sure,
I mean, you read pretty fast, but I think there's people who just read like a.
I tried to learn to speed read once, and it's an entirely different skill from what I do. I literally just read quickly, but speed reading is a skill.
I tried learning it once too. It was insane.
Did you do the same thing that I did, which was when you were at university? Go, fuck! I've got a lot of books to read. It would be so much quicker if I could speed read, and then spent a week rather than reading the reading
exactly.
list, trying to learn to speed read,
and then failing to learn to speed read, failing to do any of the reading required for the week, and then just failing generally. Not that I failed, but
I didn't fail. Let's be realistic. No. But I didn't answer a question on that topic in the exams.
Indeed. But no, I mean,
feelings
on the new book?
I'm very iffy on it. I'm excited. Sorry, that's not fair. I'm very excited for the book. I am very excited for there to be another book in the Dresden Files. I'm excited for the Dresden Files to progress. I'm hopeful that this is a sign that the books will come faster, because the pace of writing of 12 months seems to have got faster as Butcher has been writing. I'm not that particularly interested in the subject matter, I think.
What do you mean by that?
So, 12 months, as it's been pitched, is literally 12 snapshots, basically, of the 12-month courtship between Harry Dresden and, spoilers if you haven't read Battleground, skip this entire episode.
Major spoilers for anything to do with Dresden.
Yeah, actually, that was glib. That was glib, but we're going to spoil the entirety of the Dresden Files hard. So
very badly.
Go away, listen to James Masters read it, come back. But my understanding is that the book is the 12 months of the courtship of Harry and Lara, done as vignettes, basically. And I'm not grabbed by that concept at all. I'm sure it'll be better.
I'm inclined to agree with you, because who cares? It's not really the main driver of the story, is it? I don't know if that's necessarily the right way of phrasing it, but
so the only thing that I can think is, if we think about if you imagine that the Dresden Files series is actually one film, or TV show or play with a 3-act structure, you could view Battlegrounds as the end of the second act, right? The absolute nadir of the hero. Right, Murphy's just been killed. He's just got it together with Murphy. They were going to try and make that work, and then Murphy has been killed. He's at his lowest point. And so 12 months is like a mini denouement of that. It's like a mini break in the pacing before the story ramps up again. It's a tension break, potentially. But I don't know that I need that from an entire book.
That's the thing, right? Because, I mean, he's written short stories to complement the main saga, as it were. And this feels almost a bit cynical, and I guess we'll come on to you know, one of the big things we want to talk about here. But it's almost cynical, right? Because I think the zeitgeist or the sort of feeling I'm getting from people discussing this book online is like everyone's very interested in this whole Harry-Lara relationship. And I kind of feel like Butcher's taking advantage of that a little bit. I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but I just don't buy that this needs this much expanding upon.
No, I mean,
it could just be that that's how it's billed, and the 12-month storyline is you know, Harry doing his usual business.
There has to be a supernatural crime plot as well. I think that's the only way it works, is if you've got essentially a series of hilarious capers in which Harry is simultaneously trying to not date Lara, while being seen to date Lara so he doesn't offend Mab, while also trying to solve a crime that only he recognises as a crime, while being told off it by Lara. And you see how the whole thing could sit together that way. And I do think the pitch of it being structured as, it's just the 12 dates or whatever, is much more going to be a framing device than the plot. But that's the only information I have on it. So that's the only way in which I can engage with it.
Yeah, it just feels like a weird way of doing this, because I kind of agree. Obviously, Battleground felt like the end of an arc. I'd be interested to find out what you think the end of Act 1 is, but I don't know if this is what people really want to focus on, because there's also Harry being evicted from the White Council, which has major repercussions.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be dealt with.
There's so many things actually going on. So there's the eviction from the White Council. There's
the whole humans know everything about the supernatural world.
Men in grey suits.
Men in black, right?
Oh, sorry, is it the Men in Black? Who are the Men in grey suits? What's that from? Is that Pratchett?
It
doesn't matter.
I don't know.
They're
definitely the Men in Black, is it? I remember thinking, that's funny. Great reference.
Yeah, it's the librarians of Congress, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, and obviously one imagines that Jim Butcher isn't all of a sudden forgetting how to write a compelling book in this massive story that he's writing. And so these things will all come up. It's just I guess it's just called 12 months, right? I mean, 12 months post...
Yeah, it's the
post
year
Battlegrounds is fine.
The year
yeah.
after the Battle of Chicago.
So are we overestimating this whole courtship thing, maybe?
But I think that's the framing through which Butcher has told us the story will be told.
Yeah, but we've previously said that, you know,
he also lies
says a lot of
massively.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
he still has to sell books and he has to create a hype, right? So,
but I think he's also on record as saying, I will literally lie to my fans.
Yeah.
I won't lie to you on page, but I will just lie to you. And everyone's like, oh, he's so funny. And then he does just constantly lie to people. It is actually really funny. So I'm still stuck on what do I think the end of Act 1 was.
Yeah, I mean, because he was so adamant that the end of Act 2 was Battleground. I was like, well, what was Act 1 then?
Bianca's party?
I wondered if you're going to say the end of the Red Court.
So it's either Bianca's party or it's Changes.
I think Changes. I mean, the book's even called Changes.
I think it's Changes, but
I think it's
then means
Changes.
that your Act 2 is very short.
Yeah, but if
Act
it's
2 can be short.
Yeah, because if it's Bianca's party, that's also a very short Act 1.
Yeah, well, maybe Bianca's party is the end of the prologue. Who is it? In Act 1, you chase the heroes up a tree.
Yeah, because that's sort of when the
Act 2,
books
you
were still a bit
throw
rubbish.
stones at them. Yeah, that's true. Which is probably something we'll come back to.
Absolutely. But so, yeah, the internet is on fire with the hots for Lara.
We've
That
covered
kind of
Lara.
works as a statement.
We've covered Lara Raith before. I think it's fair to say the internet is mixed on Lara.
Yeah, it's an immensely polarizing topic, isn't it?
But yeah, it's very no one is middle of the fence.
No.
Everyone has a side and takes it very strongly, as we have shown in one of our previous episodes.
Absolutely. Before you do anything, before you even listen to the rest of this episode, go and listen to episode 12. Hot take,
Yes.
Lara Raith is excellent. Weirdly not as hot to take as I thought it was. Turns out.
It's really, really distressing, isn't it? Well,
it really is.
I think you are less anti-Lara than I am, because you're less human-centric than I am.
I'm very
fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I see the world in a different way that you do. I'm also not anti-Lara at all. I'm not going to say that Lara is a good person, like I've made the case very strongly.
No,
in that hot take. But as a character, I think she's fantastic.
So
she's great for the story.
And I think that's an important distinction. I think she's an excellent character, but I think she's a villain, not an anti-hero. I think she's a villain that Harry sometimes aligns with. She's the lesser evil in a lot of situations, but the important thing about the lesser evil is that it's still evil. It doesn't become good because it's sexy.
All right, Geralt. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes.
No, and that's the argument that a lot of people make. Obviously, I think that is actually a good way of trying to distinguish them, and I think she will come down more on the anti-hero side than on the pure villain side. It's a bit like Marcone, right? And we've obviously talked about Marcone at length as well. We even put him on trial.
Yeah, that was
well, you put him on trial, and I defended him so strongly.
I don't think either of us covered ourselves in glory in that episode. It was fun.
Well, let's go on the record here then. So, when all is said and done, and we haven't spoken to each other for 40 years, and the final book is written, do we think Lara Raith will have come out as an anti-hero or a villain?
That's a really good question. It's a really, really good question, because I think the answer should be villain. I think there's an important might be the wrong word. I think there's a strong message in Butcher never losing sight of the fact that Lara Raith is a villain. She may be a villain that's necessary to the ultimate victory in the final battle or whatever it might be, but I think she still needs to be a villain. I think Marcone is capable of redemption. I'm not sure Lara Raith is.
See, I kind of get where you're coming from. I just think that Jim Butcher is going about it differently.
And to be fair, I think if your question is, do you think Butcher will write her to end up as an anti-hero rather than a villain? I think the answer is probably actually yes. I just don't think he should. If he can only have one between Marcone and Lara, I think it needs to be Marcone rather than Lara. If he can have two, then I guess it's Marcone and Lara. It mustn't, for example, be Nicodemus.
There's also Harry. But this is what I was going to get to, is Nicodemus, is that he's sort of writing everybody, right, who stands against Nemesis as so unbelievably morally grey.
Yes.
That
not everyone.
Yeah, not quite everyone, but a lot of people are so grey. I think that's part of what he's trying to tell. You know, that's one of the things he's trying to get across. Is like, you know what? No matter how far gone somebody seems to be, there's always hope.
And I think
I'm not saying that does mean that Nicodemus is going to end up being a hero or an anti-hero. No, I think that's a case of a pure. Well, but then he has sort of planted the idea that you can put down the coin, right? But anyway, those are interesting speculations. I think with Lara, though, because her brother is so.
I don't think this is another point. This is a point that someone else has made in relation to a completely different topic. But the Angry GM has made this point around redeeming evil creatures in fantasy, but in tabletop role playing games specifically. So things like devils and demons and what have you, is that you can't have all your devils and demons be redeemed or even redeemable, because it breaks the idea of things that are purely evil, which I think is probably a step too far for Lara Raith. But the basic premise of we've already got a good quote unquote white court vampire in Thomas, and if you give us Lara as well, you've redeemed every white court vampire that we know, and I think that's wrong.
I don't necessarily disagree with you on that. I think that is very difficult storytelling and perhaps just outright bad storytelling. But I can't shake the feeling that that's kind of what he's going for, at least sort of keeping up the pretense until the very end.
I
right? Because he's made such a big deal of free will versus not free will, and framing it in such a way that he's like, well, the people or the entities that have free will are never in the wrong. Don't know if that's necessarily saying it exactly right, but
I don't quite know what you mean. Can you try that one again?
No,
I don't follow you. Because what I was going to say is, I agree. I think he's made such an importance of free will, specifically because he wants people judged by their choices, not by their circumstance. So, but I think that's where you can really easily draw a distinction between Thomas and Lara, because Thomas fights against who he is, basically, whereas Lara fights with who she is. Not in that she embraces who she is and uses that. She's at peace with the monster, quote unquote, that she is. She doesn't make choices from the position of I'm a monster, which is the choices that Thomas makes. Yeah. So she and Thomas might make the same choices, but they're making them for different reasons, and I think those reasons matter.
But I think that's what I was trying to say, is that you could. It's the ability to make your own choices that makes a character. What makes a character, man? I'm expressing this so dreadfully poorly. I'm reminded of our episode on immortality in the Dresden Files, where we just both lost our heads.
We got so stuck.
I feel like I'm at that stage right now. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that by engineering it so strongly in favor of free will in the Dresden Files, he's given every single character an out, including the Lara Wraiths of this world, and I guess including the Papa Wraiths of this world. Now, are they all going to end up there? It does seem unlikely, but I think Lara and I guess John Marcone are those two where they're so borderline, they could genuinely kind of go either way.
Yeah, I think that's true. That the
Molly maybe being another one, but I guess in sort of reverse, because she starts off ostensibly good, but is actually not good.
Molly's about not making the choices. So Molly's about not. There's something that Mab says.
Should just can it and start again. It's late, guys. We're recording late.
We are recording late. There's something that Harry says in Battlegrounds when thinking about Mab, about what it takes to become a monster. And he says, maybe, I'm going to butcher the quote because it's a half-remembered thing, but he essentially says, maybe you become a monster because you keep giving up a piece of yourself to save other people until there are no pieces of yourself left to give. Essentially, it's when he has one of those moments where he actually feels empathy with Mab.
Yes,
and I think Molly's story is about struggling with not giving up those pieces of herself. So struggling to not become a monster, because her becoming a monster will be a choice that she has to keep making. Whereas I think with Marcone and with Lara, well, part Lara for a moment, with Marcone, the choice to become a monster has already been made, and he's now being presented with opportunities to turn away from that choice that he's already made. He's so much further down the journey than Molly is, so his choices are about redemption rather than not falling in the first place. That took me 10 minutes to say.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, but I get your point, and I think it's reasonably well made. It's not the most eloquent thing we could have ever come up with. This is why we need editors, folks, just to AI our voices into more cohesive sentences. But you're right, and these are the sort of things that I obviously want to get at in the next couple of books and the rest of the series, right? Where do people end up? I mean, Harry himself, exactly that, right? And that's, I guess, the one we focused on more and more. But we've talked about Ebb in the past and sort of interesting choices he's making and so on, so forth.
Yeah, and I completely agree with all of that. And I think Harry is a man constantly fighting with those changes. I think that's completely fair in those choices.
Well, and everybody in those books, really, right? There's very few entities that seem to be completely unshakable in their faith. Michael being a key sort of exception, I guess.
Well, I was just going to say that, but I recently, it's one of the few Dresden things I've read recently, but I recently reread The Warrior short story, which is about Michael. It's told from the perspective of Harry, but it's about Michael just after his injury. And it shows Michael struggling with his faith and his choices there, and it's incredibly well done. Because there's a scene where Michael's essentially about to do something dark and terrible, and Harry essentially says, "Please no, you can't. If it needs to be done, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Because my soul is already stained," or whatever the phrase is, but it mustn't ever be you. You can't do it. Because Michael, as you say, everyone else looks at him as this solid, immutable point, this perfect bastion of faith. But the warrior does a really good job of showing that he's actually still human, and he's still his faith is always a choice, which I think is just really powerful.
It's interesting. I was about to say, imagine having your faith shaken, even though you know that angels exist. But I guess at that point, there's no proof that he knows that angels and archangels actually sort of wander around necessarily.
Well, no, because Harry meets Uriel again in that book. So they've met Uriel.
Yeah, but has Michael met Uriel at that point?
I think Michael definitely has met Michael at least.
Oh yeah, you do like that idea, don't you?
Well, no, because we know Sanya has met Michael because Michael gives
Sanya, yeah,
the sword. I fundamentally think that Michael has met angels. I'm sure of it because he knows about his retirement plan.
This is true, actually. Yeah, this is true. Well, so my point stands in that case. Imagine knowing that and still having doubts about faith. It's interesting, isn't it?
His doubts aren't. He doesn't doubt the existence of the Almighty or anything like that.
No. But as in, his path along that. I think.
Yeah, his ability to make the right choices is tested.
Yeah. So these are all things I want more of, right? I want to know everything, especially after nearly 5 years.
Do you know what I don't want?
To know all these things. What's that?
I don't want a book of just fanfic level.
Yeah.
Lara, Harry shipping? Is that the term?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, there's two things I don't want. I don't want 12 chapters that in turn sort of go White Council, Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Angels, Chapter 3, The Winter Court. I don't want that sort of stuff, and I'm back Jim Butcher enough to, not expect that.
No.
But yeah, what I also don't want is that every element of this book is just about shipping Lara and Harry, or Larry, as I'm going to call them from now on. Because it's not that interesting. I think what makes their relationship interesting, what's made all of Harry's relationships interesting, is that they're kind of interwoven with everything else that goes on, and they are, well, I mean, in classic Jim Butcher style, they only really exist to make the main character sad, so...
I don't know. It's the whole thing is so messed up if you think about it. Not like putting aside for one moment the fact that Lara Raith is a soul-sucking sex vampire, which, what a thing to have written. Just being
it's a classic succubus, isn't it? Really? But
I guess being forced into a marriage, an engagement, a week after, almost certainly the love of your life is murdered in front of your eyes. It's just like the emotional trauma that Harry's not going to have the time to deal with.
Yeah. No, but that I mean that's just Mab at her finest. It's so great. And you're right, that's a really interesting thing to try and unpack. I also think it'd be really interesting to go from the other side. And obviously Lara's not the protagonist, so why would we really get that insight? But I wonder if she thinks of it as having overplayed her hand. Because I can't imagine she wanted to end up here either.
I think if she doesn't at the start of the book, she will by the end of chapter 1. But no, I think so, because I mean she knows about Murphy. She knows that it was real with Murphy,
which has very profound real world implications.
Just very serious real world implications. I'm looking forward to the occasional attempt by Lara. Like I think we've spoken about this before. Almost done in good fun to like try and break the true love enchantment, whatever it is, on Harry by like throwing random women at him and seeing what happens, and being really proud of him every time it doesn't work, while Harry's like, will you please stop? I think that could be really like a really funny through line in the book. Horrifically cruel to Harry Dresden, to be clear.
Yes.
But from an authorial standpoint, like quite a funny little gag that happens 2 or 3 times on page.
Well, there's a few ways that could end up, right? Because I mean, one imagines the Winter Court probably have quite old-fashioned, think medieval wedding practices. So I can imagine the bundling or whatever ceremony you might imagine post wedding vows, and then Lara just bursts into flame. Effectively, it's like, well, that's over.
Towards the end of the book, Lara is like, if we're going to go through with this, you have to do this, because like we're going to have to consummate this marriage and people are going to have to watch, and I'm not getting set on fire. Please fix this, please.
Exactly.
Which can be quite funny.
But I sort of can't quite remember the particulars of that enchantment.
If the last
word, that sort of protective.
I think it's if the last person you had sex with loved you, you are protected. I think is how it
but there must be a way to sort of have that end, right? Because there's no way that just
Well, but
'Cause
Justine...
then a lot of people would be protected from White Court vampires a lot of the time.
No, but Thomas makes this point. So, firstly, true love, quote unquote, as it is for the White Court, is actually very rare. So, for example, Harry and Anastasia's relationship doesn't protect Harry from the White Court. But also you've got Thomas and Justine's relationship, where Justine is protected every time from Thomas every time she has sex with Thomas. So she has to essentially bring someone in to break the protection so that they can be together. But you can just break it very easily.
Yeah, but I think the prevailing idea for the Larry shippers, yes, folks, the Larry shippers, is
hate it.
Yes, got him. Is that obviously they'll be in love with each other, right? And then that'll sort of break something, as you say. We've seen that with Justine and Thomas.
It won't, because we've
kind
seen it
of
with Justine
doesn't
and
really
Thomas.
work.
Like it's just daft because we've seen it with Justine and Thomas, and it doesn't work.
No, but
the only way it works is if they don't love each other. And
then the consummation works. But what I'm saying is that what'll be the twist, I think, is that they do end up loving each other, and it kind of protects Harry from her. Long term.
But it won't. But it just won't. That's not how it works. And the only way that it works that way is if Butcher rewrites the rules of his own universe.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he can do. He's done it before.
Something Justine was infected.
Something Justine was infected.
No, I don't know. I'm just trying to sort of understand what a lot of the shippers, the Larry shippers, are kind of seeing here.
The only way that Harry and Lara can have the relationship that the Larry shippers want them to have...
He said it.
I'm going to use your shorthand because I'm tired. I don't like it. Is if Harry never loves Lara, and if Harry knows that he doesn't love Lara, which he will do the first time he touches her after they've had sex, he won't keep doing it because he's an old school romantic, he tells us. Like, it's fun. You have to find a way. This is the only way I think you can do it. You have to find a way to break Lara being White Court in order to make it work.
Well, that could be interesting, yeah. That could be an interesting little play.
There's an argument that, well, we know that there's a cure for being a White Court vampire, assuming you catch it before it happens, if you like. There's like an inoculation against it that we see with Inari Raith. But otherwise, the only thing I've seen is people have suggested that wielding Amarachius in some way might protect you from your own White Court demon. Although I'm not entirely sure how that would work.
Yeah, well, there have been sort of those odd suggestions of one of the swords being wielded by a vampire.
Well, I've seen a lot of people suggest that Thomas could end up holding Amarachius, the Sword of Love, and something about the interplay there means that he stops being stops being White Court.
Well, yeah, and Thomas is in dire need of fixing.
The other thing that the other thing that I wonder you could do, if you could find a way to stab him with Amarachius, and then you've got a sort of symbol.
Well, yeah, because Harry's seen the demon and Thomas
kill the demon with love. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be interesting to work out. I guess what
all of these.
I mean, the prevailing wisdom is that Harry. Well, I mean, we know there's a death curse, right? So Harry's supposed to die alone. But that
he's
could
already
be
died.
interpreted in a different way. Has he?
Maybe.
Never really considered that. That'd be such a weird Harry Potter-esque glitch.
But also, Cassius Quintus Cassius was like a pretty shit wizard. It's not a Harry level death.
But that's what I'm saying, that it could be that somehow him being with Lara in what is effectively an empty relationship is kind of like dying alone. I don't know if that necessarily tracks, but I'd sort of like to explore that idea a little bit.
Yeah. He's trapped in a relationship with Lara, in which he feels profoundly lonely. Yeah, that's potentially...
And essentially just is perpetually in love with somebody who died. I mean, we know he's not the best at dealing with grief.
That would be very Harry.
Yeah, and so he's therefore always miserable, which kind of makes Butcher's job easier.
Yeah, it makes him very happy.
But so... Yeah, many things where I could go. What I think would be quite interesting, we've kind of alluded to this in the past, and it's why I guess some of the internet is so on fire about all this, is the way that Butcher writes some of this stuff.
Yes.
Right? Although one interesting thing that I came across when looking on Reddit and things like that about the Lara-Harry relationship is somebody made the very good point, actually. It's like, I don't know why people are so obsessed with this idea that Lara Raith is like hot, because you never see her because it's a bloody book, and she's not described in like that much detail.
But that's the point, I think. So if you go back to the first book in which we meet Lara, which of course it's the porn book, in which she is Lara Romany, Joan, the soon-to-be wife of the studio owner, talks about Lara as being like sex on legs or something. And the point that Harry makes all the time in relation to Lara isn't that she's attractive or that she's not attractive or anything like that. It's that doesn't matter. Like her presence, her very presence is what's seductive. Like,
but I guess my point is that sure, but I don't think she's described any more or less, or any better or worse, than a lot of the women described in the Dresden Files.
No, I mean she's not given the same sort of leering once-over that someone like Mab or Maeve or Jenny Greenteeth or any of the fairy women, really, or Susan or Anastasia or Karen or Andy or
exactly.
Mars. Like, you see my point.
Even relatively minor characters, right, get such an enormous amount of page space to just describe the pointy ends of their breasts,
which is, I think, where people get quite disturbed. Molly,
well, it is quite
Charity,
disturbing. That's
why. But I really struggle with this. Perhaps not for the reason that people would accuse me of. I hear a lot of the time what people say about the way that Butcher writes women, and I do think that I have to be careful how I put this.
Yeah, I can tell that you're really inching forwards here.
I think that Butcher is very conscious of the way in which he writes women. I don't think he's doing it accidentally, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yes. Because I agree.
I think what we're getting, and this comes back to the idea that our point of view character is Harry, who is the most sexually repressed person ever put to page. But also,
there's an interesting episode. Yes. Okay.
I've said that quite globally. But also, these books at least start out as noirs. Like, the descriptions, I don't know. The gaze feels deliberate. It doesn't feel like it's men writing women for men, if that makes sense. It feels like Butcher's authorial style through the lens of Harry is giving us an insight into Harry's character. And let's also be fair. I know we maybe at this point need to consider authorial intent, but all of the women that, with the possible exception of Karen Murphy, although she's not often described in the same way, all of the women that are written in this way are pretty aware of the effect that their looks have. Like, he's not ogling people who don't want to be ogled.
Ooh, that's an interesting take.
I've said that without having gone back through the books to check every single person.
The reason I say it's an interesting take is because I feel like you're not wrong, but I equally can't confirm that.
I would feel comfortable sustaining that most of the people in my list. That is true of most of the people in my list. There will be people who not in my list for whom it may not be true.
I think this is part of the issue. So there's 2 points there. So I think I actually agree with a lot of what you just said, if not all of it.
I won't hold you to all of it. I'll give you a backdoor.
No, but one anecdotal issue, and I've seen this on the internet, I know this from personal experience, is that I've recommended this series to female friends who haven't been able to get past the first couple of books. And now we've both previously said, and I think it's not necessarily a secret, the first couple of books are a little bit ropey. But one friend in particular, she couldn't get past that sort of sexism aspect of it. She's like, it's really quite creepy how some of these things are being described.
And we have to be blunt. This is two men talking about
quite
the books, so we're going to have a different reaction to them. And if that's your reaction to the first 2 books, absolutely fair.
Yeah. But this is why, I agree with you, but this is where I think if that is Butcher's intent, I think he misjudged the effect it might have. Right? Because I get it. I agree with you. As a narrator, very much like Harry, can think about things that way, and it can make authorial sense, but it's not going to sell your books. Right? So it's a bit of a weird decision to have gone that way.
But it is also relatively in keeping with the genre of the first couple of books.
It is in keeping with that. But then, read the room a little bit. This is we're not in that time anymore.
And
I think the second point, because I agree, it feels like all the women in these series, and I say women to include vampires and fairies,
and all of that,
things. Yeah. You're right. They're like, we know we're hot stuff. But that's also kind of off-putting. It's almost more off-putting than just having the narrator being unreliable and deprived, as you've put it. And I guess maybe it's the same argument as, their reactions are interpreted by the narrator, but you can kind of take that ad absurdum, and it's not helpful. But I think that sort of idea of like, every woman is hot and they know they're hot and they use it to their advantage is fundamentally also problematic.
Yes. That's true. I guess my challenge is a lot of the time parking Andy, basically. They are in, and I suppose Anastasia to a lesser degree, they're in relatively hostile or at least acrimonious relationship with Dresden. And Dresden is so shit with women and so easily blinded by a attractive woman, effectively.
Yeah.
A damsel in distress type that
even when they're virtually never in distress, but yes.
Even when they're not in distress, that they could be reacting to him. I don't know.
I think the bottom line is it is very hard to under oath say that Harry Dresden is anything but sexist.
I don't think I'd try.
And that's problematic. No, because it's not really addressed outside of any of that context in the books.
But I guess my challenge is, I don't argue with the premise at all. Harry Dresden is a sexist character. I don't know that makes the books sexist.
Yeah, that's also where I can't quite decide.
Because
but I think that's what I'm saying, is I feel like there's never any real challenge to those concepts, except, I guess, Murphy calling Harry a pig very often. But
the concepts are only ever in his head. Well, other than his... Well,
they're often in his head, but they're also very often not just in his head.
Is that true?
I refer you back to Karen Murphy calling Harry a pig more than once.
Yeah, no, I mean, she specifically calls him a sexist pig, but that's in relation to, like, when Harry knows he's being a sexist pig. Like, I think that you have to... I appreciate he's the point of view character, he's the narrator. Everything is framed through his experience of the world. But I don't think the world is sexist. I think that Harry is sexist in a world which has, I hesitate to use the phrase, strong female characters, independent, and their strength is independent of their relationship with men. Murphy is a strong female character who calls Dresden out on his chauvinism and sexism and all of that.
And not to mention the queens and mothers and ladies and various other insanely strong female characters that are just portrayed as such, right? I mean, yeah, sure, if we're seeing them through Harry's lens, it's a little bit different. And so this is why I think, to me, you just have to say, yeah, Harry Dresden, the character, is sexist and deprived, and you can kind of make it make sense. And Butcher is going for that purposefully. I'm just saying it may be not the best approach, or it's a bit of a botched job. But I don't really know how you get the same kind of effect without being so overt about it.
I think the problem is it's more overt. Harry's way of dealing with women is more overt in the earlier books. And you don't have as many powerful female characters in the earlier books. You have far more victims. So if you think about Stormfront in particular, the very first book, you have a lot of way bit back when this or Full Moon is arguably where it's at its worst. You have I'm not going to remember any of their names. Monica Sells, who's the woman who hires Harry, who is described as like sexy but wearing a cardigan, who is a victim. You have Jennifer Stanton, maybe, who is like a sex kitten, who is a victim. You have Murphy, who in that book is relatively antagonistic, certainly not an ally, and we don't see her strength. Susan, who is at that point just a reporter and is like
an insanely attractive reporter.
Insanely attractive reporter, and Harry says something along the lines of the most attractive thing about her was that she didn't realise she was attractive, or something like that, which is a weird thing to say. You don't have the queens, you don't have the ladies, you don't have Captain Lucio, you don't have Molly as like an empowered woman, or any of this. So that's bad. Like
it's one Hey doll removed from just no.
Yeah. I mean, but the problem is, it is noir, right? Harry's sitting in his office reading his mail.
Yeah.
Probably got a fedora on. Everything's in black and white and sepia.
No, because he hates hats.
When the door knocks and a woman with legs that go all the way to the ground walked in. She was good looking, and it's so noir, it's unbelievable.
Go all the way to the ground.
Have you never heard that phrase, legs that go all the way to the ground? Never. It doesn't matter.
Surely the description has to go the other. Anyway, yes.
No, but that's a phrase. Look it up. That's genuinely a phrase. Legs that go all the way to the ground.
That feels like you're tricking me into something I don't want to Google.
I'm genuinely not. Anyway, you've completely thrown me. It's so noir. It's like the whole opening
this is the
sequence
point.
But I think you're right. What you said.
It's so noir. It's just like
we don't do noir anymore.
Yeah, we don't do it like that. And maybe you're actually right, isn't in that? Yeah, Stormfront and Full Moon really start off very strong with that, and over time it kind of, as largely the grander story gets grander,
and he becomes a better author. Like fundamentally, Stormfront and Full Moon are not as good as the rest of the series.
Yeah, and the story develops, and we leave out some of that stuff that makes. Because the first couple of books are a little bit icky,
Oh, they are. Like, they absolutely are. I don't think there's any getting away from that. The first few books, and it continues in some ways throughout. The way Harry talks about Molly is weird.
Yes. But I think then you can really make that sort of excuse of, we're just inside this character's head, and he's got the same flaws that people have. He has thoughts that are rubbish, but we also see him thinking, particularly about Murphy, for example, like thinking about her strength, right, and talking about it. And so you can just say, that feels like relatively good character writing.
And also, if you think about in Grave Peril, the third book, when he sees Murphy with his sight, it's not a sexualized image at all. What he sees is her strength.
Yeah.
Which I think is fundamentally important, that sort of angelic, Valkyrie-esque foreshadowing.
Yes, very much so.
I don't know. I'm never going to argue with someone that says that, though. I'm never going to argue with someone that says that Stormfront and Full Moon put them off the series because of that, because it is bad. And I don't think there's any argument to the contrary. I think they're badly written. Well, no. I don't think they're inherently badly written. I think they're not as well written. And also, there are some artifacts of unpleasantness that don't make it into the later books that it's easy to not get past.
It's that classic thing that some people just don't go for. It's like, bear with it, it'll get better. And I think the only reason I got through it is because, I think, were like, no, this is actually a really good book series. And actually, friend of the show and frequent listener Justine also said, no, Dresden Files is a really good series.
As did friend of the show and historic guest Ellie, I think. And it's worth pointing out, Ellie, I don't think I was speaking out of turn, has a real problem with the way, even now, has a real problem with the way Butcher writes women. Not the way Harry interacts with women, but the way Butcher writes women.
Yeah.
The Butters werewolf threesome stuff. She just says gives her major ick.
That is also just so unnecessary.
I think that is actually your strongest argument in favour of, come on, Jim.
That is... I don't know. I still don't really know what that scene is meant to convey, other than Jim just had a little bit of a moment. Or it was a bet. I don't really know.
So
perhaps we should revisit this with some guests. I think that could be quite a fun thing to do.
I don't know whether you could get Justine on, but I think certainly Ellie would come on for this. She hates Butters, though, and I'm not sure we can sustain that.
Well, my Discord username on our Discord is still Justice for Butters, purely because of her going at him.
It's proper hatred, isn't it?
It really is. And I mean, yeah, the threesome scene, dreadful.
But no, let's be very, very clear.
No, scene is.
It's not a scene.
Yeah, scene is.
It's an implication
It's an
of
implication.
The problem is the real problem with that, as I understand it, and I'd be corrected by people who know better than me, is the way Butters reacts. So it says something along the lines of like, "I don't know how this happened, and don't you dare ruin it for me."
Yeah.
It's that line is played for a guy laugh, which I don't think is a fair representation of a polyamorous relationship.
Yeah, and it's just an example of where Jim Butcher, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if he just took random bets from people at times to put these sort of things in, because there's also the like ridiculously uncharacteristic bondage sex scene with Susan. That's so much more graphic than anything else.
It's so much more graphic than anything. It's shockingly graphic.
It's like either he wrote that going through a bit of a rough patch, or that was literally just a bet.
The man has gone through a life, right? He has had an up and down, topsy-turvy life. So it's entirely possible that's what he was going through.
But it's also, the editor just read that and went, yeah, that's fine.
We'll put that in. People will read that section over and over.
Maybe it was when 50 Shades of Grey came out and they're like, yeah, this is what people want at the moment.
That's probably
I don't know, I've got no idea.
Probably worth checking. Actually, but there are definitely times where you feel like Jim Butcher's elbow is just in your side going, A.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, yeah.
Which
jockeying.
You don't really need.
I mean, like, bottom line is, I'd like to think of the two of us as not sexist, chauvinist pigs.
Very few people think of themselves as sexist, chauvinist pigs.
I'd like to think that other people necessarily don't think of us that way.
I would hope not.
And we quite like the books. And yes, we are two nerds with an inflated sense.
I thought you were about to say we quite like women.
Intelligence. We quite like women. I mean, that's also true.
Some of my best friends are women.
Quite. But the point stands that, yeah, we've recognized that there are moments where you're going, okay, this is not necessarily okay. But it is outweighed. Oh, this is a horrible argument to make, isn't it?
I think it's
cut that out.
Entirely.
Oh, fuck, I'm editing.
I think you are. We need to come inelegantly to a close. I think it's entirely possible to say there are times, few and far between, where the elbow in the ribs gets too strong.
Yeah,
and really, it is the job of the editors and the fandom to say, unless the werewolf polycule becomes relevant, why did you put it in the books?
Oh, but now he's going to make it relevant.
No, but it's like if it's relevant, fine. But if you're gonna put it in the books, do it more tastefully than you did. Like, I don't know, that one is one that I constantly come back to as almost inexcusable. Like, it feels like, and this might be unfair, it feels like he didn't speak to anyone who's ever been in a relationship like that before he wrote it. He watched loads of videos on the internet and then wrote it.
He went on YouTube and
that's generous. I think he cracked open an incognito tab and then went diving, but oh
god.
I don't think I've got anything else to say.
Uriel's always watching. No, there are just weird things, right? I mean, some of the turns of phrase that he uses, you're just like, wow, must we? But yeah,
I mean, if I read one more paragraph about the tips of someone's breast, I think I might bang my head against a wall. But I think to close this, as I said, inelegantly, I think they are few enough and far enough between to not, for me, detract from the overall series. And I would feel fairly confident in saying that on the whole, I didn't consider the books as a series to be misogynistic, sexist, anything like that. And I think that's fairly easy to sustain. I think they have elements that are problematic, but a lot of them have had adequate story relevance. Some of them haven't yet, but they will, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Because, bottom line is hyped for 12 months.
Oh, massively.
Very interesting to see how it turns out. I hope we get sort of all the story elements we want. It'd be interesting to see. I guess by definition it'll be a sort of a white court book if he's reverting to that kind of in waves style.
It's a vampire book, I think.
Yeah, I guess it has to be, right? Because those are the interesting things we were left with.
We've not long since had a fairy book and an angel book, so we're probably just about due a vampire book.
Yeah, no, so it'll be interesting. I hope it'll be soon, but I suspect that we'll probably talk Dresden again on this particular show before it comes out.
So I think all that remains is to say thanks for listening to this episode of Expertise is Overrated. No doubt we've said some things that were either objectively wrong or downright offensive. As ever, feel free to let us know. Rate the podcast wherever you can. Check out our Patreon for bonus content and come chat to us on our Discord.
If you're lucky, we might just argue with you in one of our upcoming episodes. And if you're really lucky, we might call you an idiot. Come back next time for some more absolute nonsense.